کشمیر ہمارا ہے، کشمیر ہمارا ہے، کشمیر سے دہلی تک یہ ملک ہمارا ہے، کشمیر 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 ہمارا ہے، کشمیر ہمارا ہے، ہم تن من دھن وارے کشمیر کی وادی پر، ہر قطرہ خون قرباں تیری آزادی پر، ہم تن من دھن وارے کشمیر کی وادی پر، ہر قطرہ خون قرباں تیری آزادی پر، تیری خاک کا ہر ذرہ، تیری خاک کا ہر ذرہ دل و جان سے پیارا ہے، دل و جان سے پیارا ہے، کشمیر ہمارا ہے، کشمیر ہمارا ہے، کشمیر سے دہلی تک یہ ملک ہمارا ہے، کشمیر 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 ہمارا ہے، کشمیر ہمارا ہے، کشمیر کی وادی کے مظلوم مسلمانوں، اے صبر کے کوثروں، جذبات کے طوفانوں، کشمیر کی وادی کے مظلوم مسلمانوں، اے صبر کے کوثروں، جذبات کے طوفانوں، کشمیر کی وادی نے، کشمیر کی وادی نے پھر تم کو پکارا ہے، پھر تم کو پکارا ہے، کشمیر ہمارا ہے، کشمیر ہمارا ہے، کشمیر سے دہلی تک یہ ملک ہمارا ہے، کشمیر 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 ہمارا ہے، کشمیر ہمارا ہے، ہم جیل کے دروازے ایک ضرب سے توڑیں گے، اب ہند کے چیلوں کو زندہ نہیں چھوڑیں گے، ہم جیل کے دروازے ایک ضرب سے توڑیں گے، اب ہند کے چیلوں کو زندہ نہیں چھوڑیں گے۔
Kashmir human rights violations conference with folketing, and stort welcome, a great welcome to everybody. First of all, I would like to present our distinguished guest sitting here in front of me, and on the right side, I will start from right, Mr. Khalid, who is the president of Tehreek Kashmir Europe. I will present myself. I am the general secretary of Tehreek Kashmir Europe, and this is our distinguished ambassador, His Excellency Gadresi Sahab, and this is our president, Masood Khan Sahab, Azad Kashmir. We have Turabi Sahab, member, Legislative Assembly, Azad Kashmir. We have our Ghulam Muhammad Safi Sahab, Korea Conference convener. We have Dr. Professor Ilyas Sahab from America, who is American Council President, and then on the left side, Fahim Pyari Sahab, who is the President of Tehreek Kashmir UK. I would like to have Zenia on stage, who is the host for today. Great applause for Zenia.
Thank you very, very much, and welcome to Christian Talk. It's a little silent here, maybe you have noticed, because it's a holiday. But we're here today because it's a very important issue. And first of all, I want to welcome you all to this conference about a very important but also a very neglected issue, the human rights situation in Kashmir. Kashmir and its people were promised self-determination. Instead, the region was divided by a heavy militarized control line, and the plebiscite they were promised by the international society was never held. There are many explanations to this, but none of them are about the people of Kashmir. All of them are about power the rivalry between India and Pakistan, the strategic location of the region, now even will become a trade corridor between Pakistan and China, the existence of nuclear weapons, wars, military resistance, and recently, terror, and even more important, the fight against terror being used as a justification for suppression and violation of the Kashmiri people and their most basic human rights. And the human rights, that is the subject for today. Not the greater Kashmiri conflict, even though it will be there as a background. And of course, you could point to the UN Resolution 47 and say that the international community promised the Kashmiri people a Pakistan, and that India and Pakistan should be obliged to implement that and give the Kashmiri people self-determination. And I also think that we should say that and say it even louder. But the reality is that we don't have an international community that's ready to stand up for this cause. And if necessary, use power to implement. Take my own government. When I recently asked my foreign minister what the government's official position was in Kashmir, he just answered, the government support the reopening of the dialogue and peace and reconciliation between India and Pakistan.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, everybody. We are delighted to have you here to participate in International Kashmir Conference. I know many of you travel long distances to remind us how important this cause is. We are honored to have the President of Azad Kashmir, Mr. Masood Khan, convener Hurriyat Conference, Mr. Ghulam Muhammad Safi Sahib, Member Parliament Kashmir Abdul Rashid Durabi Sahib, and other distinguished guests. I welcome you all here in this conference. Before I let you know about something about the Kashmir, especially to my Danish fellow, it's a very important that I let you know about some facts of Kashmir so you can understand how important this issue is. The land size of Kashmir is 80,000 square miles, which is greater than 103 sovereign countries. The population of Kashmir is 20 million, including 2 million refugees in Pakistan, and this population is bigger than 129 independent nations. It is the only nation in the world that shares its border with 3 nuclear powers, India, Pakistan, and China. And it is universally acknowledged that the Kashmir is global danger because both India and Pakistan have the nuclear weapons, and they have fought 3 wars just past half-century over Kashmir. Kashmir is the longest surviving dispute on the earth. It is internationally recognized disputed territory, whose final status yet to be determined. India is a big hurdle in getting the solution to Kashmir. India does not want to resolve the Kashmir conflict, but to dissolve it. India wants Kashmir issue to be buried under the rug. India has occupied the major part of Kashmir. Kashmir is not an integral part of India. Let me clear, it is very important point that Kashmir is not integral part of India. First, this claim is rejected by the Kashmiri people, and the second, it's never been accepted by the United Nations and never legally validated. Under all international agreements, agreed both India and Pakistan, negotiated by the United Nations, endorsed by the Security Council, and accepted by the international community, it is accepted that it's a disputed territory and does not belong to any member state of the United Nations. World community silence over Kashmir give the impression that the Kashmiri lives and their hopes are worthless. Its sovereignty and its right of self-determination and the human rights is being ignored. The world power, including Denmark, can and should lead an effort to the settlement of this dispute. It's a very fair for the Denmark also, for their democracy also, for their dedication for the human right also. But the last and very important thing that now we have to think about the solution. What would be the solution? The first step toward the solution would be the demilitarization of Kashmir through the withdrawal of all outside forces. And second, genuine and authentic Kashmiri leadership, some of them also present here, should be involved on negotiation table with India and Pakistan. And the last thing, which is very, very, very important thing, that the future of Kashmir shall be decided in accordance with the wishes and the will of Kashmiris. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Adil bhai, enlightening us about Kashmir and about the resolution also. Thanks a lot. The next guest on stage, I would like to invite Mrs. Tehreek, who is an international rights advocate and a novelist. A great hand to
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be speaking here today. Mr. President, Mr. Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen, I had hoped in some ways there would be more Danish politicians present here, because in a way, those are the ones I'm speaking to. Because you may know that the Human Rights Declaration that many of us Danes take for granted because we, to a large extent, have human rights secured here. But it's being questioned for the moment by the extreme right in a way that would have seemed unfathomable 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But it's very safe for our right-wing parties to question the Human Rights Declaration because they generally are safeguarded for us, particularly for us who were born in this country. But the reason the Human Rights Declaration is so extraordinarily important, and why it's important also Denmark uphold it, is that these rights are exactly not safeguarded in other parts of the world. And where you don't have a government or governing power respecting your human rights, that's where you know why they're essential to your daily life. It's when you can't send your child to school and think and believe that they'll be taught your culture, your history in earnest, you know that there is an absence of right to culture. I'll read a few of the articles of the Human Rights Declaration because often we just speak about them, but not knowing how amazing they actually are. They're so precise as to what can make a society function, how we can interact with one another, and this deep understanding that the freedom of one person ends where the freedom of another person starts, where it doesn't end where power is abused. Their ability to clamp down on people using their personal freedoms. So Article 1 is that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They're endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in spirit of brotherhood. But how can you have equality in dignity and rights when your country is occupied by a force that doesn't treat you equal to every other citizen? It says in Article 2 that everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race, color, sex, language, religion, political or other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth, or other status, and that no distinction shall be made on the basis of the jurisdictional or international status of the country or territory to which a person belongs, whether it be independent, trust, non-self-governing, or under any other limitation of sovereignty, which is, I think, what we can say is the case for Kashmir. And Article 3, everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of person. But when you send your young out, and you send them out to shop or to see friends, and you don't know if they'll come back, not due to crime, but to the forces in power and their abuse of their power, then there is an absolute lack of safety. When you know that you'll never see the day in court where the unlawful killing of your cousins, or the rape of your wife, or the wrongful arrest of your brother, then there is an absolute absence of justice in society. And when you know your child may be arrested arbitrarily while playing or doing other things with friends, and yet may die in custody or by wounds sustained by aggression of the very people who should protect your child because they are in power, then you also know that there are no human rights in the area where you live. And when you know that the army or militias governing you can shoot at your eyes with pellets, can blind you, you do know that the way they blind you is mirroring their own blindness to justice. And yet it says here in the Article 5 of Human Rights that no one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. It also says that all are equal before the law and are entitled without any discrimination to equal protection of the law. And it says somewhere else that, I think it's 21, that everyone has the right to take part in the government of his country, and the will of the people shall be the basis of the authority of government. This will shall be expressed in periodic and genuine elections, which shall be by universal and equal suffrage, and shall be held by secret vote or by equivalent free voting procedures. So, when you're not treated equally by the Constitution that supposedly governs you, and decade after decade, you're a secondary citizen in your own territory. You know that an apartheid system has been imposed, and you know that only true dignity, true equality as citizen can come to you by free choice, by democracy. And you also know that when the army can tie a civilian to a car and drive through the streets to warn off people from claiming their political rights, and yet that very army officer gets promoted afterwards and is not held to justice, you do know that you won't get democracy through those who are presently in power. So you have to work to change that system through being allowed a choice of your own will. And this is why I think, whoever may listen from the Danish government, it's essential that Denmark helps the Kashmiri people call for a referendum, a free and fair referendum, so that you can start working towards a situation where everyone has the human rights that I hope also my country has.
Thanks a lot, Janet, for very, very strong words. And hopefully your last comment will come soon. Thanks a lot. I think you took my agenda also, but fine. I know the next speaker. So, okay, thanks a lot. I would like to invite on stage the next speaker, which is Fahim Payani, who is Tehreek Kashmir, president of UK. He is one of our young leaders. So a warm welcome to Fahim Payani.
His Excellency Sardar Sultan, President Azad Jammu and Kashmir, His Excellency Sultan Ambassador of Pakistan, Atoshi Rabi, Member of Parliament Kashmir, Ghulam Mosavi, Convener all parties with conference, Dr. Imtiaz Sahab, Ansar Mansoor Sahab, Mohammed Ghazi Sahab, human rights activists, dear friends and colleagues, Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. Kashmir is a story of broken promises and a story of misery for centuries. The story starts in 1846 when the British sold the whole Kashmir for merely 7.5 million Nanak. This is a Sikh currency. From that day, Kashmiris have been suffering human rights abuses, while the British did absolutely nothing. In 1947, when India and Pakistan was celebrating their independence, Kashmiris should have decided their own future, but instead India is occupying part of Kashmir illegally. The first Indian Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, promised the people of Kashmir self-determination. But this commitment has never been honored by India. We are pained by the suffering of our people and wish to do something within our means and capacity that might help change the situation better. Our people have waited for 7 decades for the UN to get its own resolution implemented, but nothing has happened. At the moment, Kashmir is divided. 12.5 million people are living under Indian occupation, which is the most militarized region in the world. Over 700,000 Indian army has been given virtually immunity to commit human rights violation in Kashmir in the form of Armed Forces Special Power Act. This act permits the armed forces to arrest anyone and enter any property without a warrant. They are authorized to fire armed or otherwise use force against peaceful protesters. The people in Indian occupied Kashmir have suffered massive human rights abuses, and since 1989, so far more than 100,000 Kashmiris have been killed by the brutal Indian army. More than 10,000 people are missing. Around 22,000 people, Kashmiri women have been widowed. 10,000 Kashmiri women have been gang raped, and about 107,000 children have been orphaned. Besides, there are an estimated 1,500 half-widows, wives whose husbands have disappeared but not yet declared as dead. Yet the world community, especially United States and the UK, have been silent due to their economic interest. The Kashmiris living in the UK and Europe have been lobbying different European governments to put pressure on India to come and negotiate with Pakistan and the Kashmiri representatives. India refuses and claims that Kashmir is an integral part of India, which is not true, because Kashmir is not and can't be regarded as an integral matter of India, because under all international agreements agreed by both India and Pakistan, negotiated by the United Nations, endorsed by the Security Council and accepted by the international community, Kashmir is a disputed territory and doesn't belong to any member state of the United Nations. The United Nations resolution make it clear that it is the only Kashmiri people who can determine the future of Kashmir. If Kashmir is part of India, why would the Indian government do need 700,000 army in Kashmir? Surely this is an illegal occupation. We ask the Danish government and ask the Danish parliament to work with other European countries and try to help in any way to first stop the human rights abuses by the Indian occupation forces. Secondly, that within the United Nations framework, this issue must be discussed between the parties and resolved as soon as possible. Because Pakistan and India being nuclear capable countries, we could have a nuclear catastrophic war which would destroy the whole of South Asia. This matter needs urgent attention because daily the Indian forces keep killing people within occupied land and also shelling on the ceasefire line and killing people in Azad Kashmir. Kashmiri urge the world community to help them achieve their birthright of self-determination. Once again, thank you. Freedom for all, freedom for all.
Thanks a lot, Faneem. Thanks a lot. And thanks a lot for coming all the way from UK. Our next speaker is Dr. Professor Imtiaz Khan Sahab, who has traveled all the way from USA together with Mrs. Khan, all the way from USA to speak here today. So a big hand to Dr. Professor Imtiaz Khan.
First and foremost, I want to thank the organizers for organizing this event and inviting me to speak on this great occasion. This means a lot for people of Kashmir. And I represent Indian occupied Kashmir because I live there. Well, I live in the United States, but all of my family lives in Kashmir, and they are going through all the suffering. And what I'm going to narrate right now, I'm not a diplomat, I'm not a politician, I'm not affiliated to any political party. I'm the sufferer of this atrocities which is being inflicted on the innocent people of Kashmir. So, forgive me, I am a little blunt, and moreover, I was in Kashmir 1 week ago. So, a lot of our earlier speakers have spoken about atrocities committed on innocent people of Kashmir. And there are a few glaring examples. And Khurram Parvez, heading one of the NGOs who lost his leg in the bomb blast, and his colleague was killed. He has compiled a very excellent report, which was released in Pakistan. It is a 1,000-page report which talks about each and every human right atrocity inflicted on the people of Kashmir. There are cases like Jalil Amrabi, an eminent lawyer, basically who was working for human rights organization. He was one day kidnapped by Avtar Singh, a colonel in Kashmir Rifles, and his family went helter-skelter to report where he is gone, and finally his body was found on the lake of Jhelum Lake. His eyes were gouged, his bones were broken. And Avtar Singh, instead of being punished, was facilitated by Indian government, and he moved to the United States in California, where he married. And the psychopath that he had become, after 15 years, he killed his own wife and children. So to me, the murder of those innocent people is on the hands of Indian government. There is a story of Kunal Poshpora. If you go to Amazon, there's a very excellent book written by 5 young ladies who have investigated, in which 80 armed men of Russia Rifles raped 50 women for whole night. The men were thrown out. And the youngest one who was raped was 9 years old, and oldest one was 80 years old. And was there any punishment? No. They were tortured, and they were basically put pressure on them to not report this case. But these women have done an excellent job, and there's a book. If you go to Amazon.com, you can see that book, Kunal Poshpora Rape Case, written by these 5 young women. As has been said, till now 125,000 people have been murdered. 20,000 women have been raped, and there are mass graves. And who discovered those mass graves? It was not anybody from India, a Muslim, or anybody from Pakistan. It was a Hindu, Angana Chatterjee, or associate professor in the University of San Francisco, along with her Jewish husband, Dr. Shapiro. She moved with a lawyer, Parvez Imroz, who has been now receiving one of the very prominent awards in Norway. As a matter of fact, Parvez Imroz is in Norway. And when they found 2,500 people buried in these mass graves, and when the Indian government got wind of it, they were chased out of India, and they are not allowed to come back. This is a crime which was committed by Saddam Hussein. This was a crime which was committed by a dictator in Yugoslavia. If they can be tried by the International Court of Justice, if Saddam Hussein can be hanged for these mass graves, why cannot be the perpetrators of these horrendous crimes in Jammu and Kashmir? I visited Kashmir last year. After the murder of Burhan Wani, I'm sure many of you must have heard of Burhan Wani. A young kid, 22 years old, who was very meritorious candidate, loved cricket like any 17, 18 years old. His brother was picked up the army and thrashed and bled to death. Then he went underground. He didn't commit any murder. I challenge Indian government to report any human rights atrocity he has committed, any act of terrorism he committed. He sent video clips appealing to young youth of the Kashmir to join this movement. And Burhan Wani was killed. He was captured, and then he was killed in cold. And you know what? Indian government imposed dusk to dawn curfew. And to his funeral, there were 500,000 people came on foot, walking miles and miles to pay salute to this hero of Kashmir. And shame on you, India. Your handpicked Prime Minister, Chief Minister, Mufti said, when he died, there were 50 people, and they had sent 500 people in for police to give semblance of respectability to his funeral. People of Kashmir have spoken. When they died, they wrapped their bodies in the flag of Pakistan. What have you done? You're talking of so many elections. Okay, have one election. Give them choice. And outcome, if Gilani Saab doesn't like it, that's okay. If they go with India, that's fine. The problem solved. But you know, these huge gatherings are testimony to the fact what people of Kashmir know. The hearts of people of Kashmir beat in unison with the hearts of people of Pakistan. Last year when I went after Burhan Wani's murder, I felt I had landed in the garrison city. And as a matter of fact, what I saw, the ambulances were stopped, doctors were beaten, even patients were beaten. And because I'm not very familiar with the interior of Kashmir to that extent, my relatives tell me that because any trigger-happy soldier would kill you, you better leave. Only thing what saved me was my American passport. Not that that is a guarantee, but somehow they were impressed by it. And youth were doing a commendable job. They were supplying medicine to the young, sick people, seeing that nobody dies hungry. And I told them that I am from the same son of the soil. How can I help you? I can help you with whatever little I have. They told me, Imtiaz Ahmad, we know you are from America. And we know you make money in dollars. But we don't need your money. You live in Washington, D.C., the world capital. And try to spread the word what is going on. That is your contribution to the cause of Kashmir. When I came to Washington, D.C., I went with 4 or 5 of my colleagues. In 1 week, we visited about 53 consulates. The picture we got was that everybody knows, and it is a surprising thing that we went to one of the embassies of Finland, and I told my friend that Finland is not diplomatically so active, so do we need to go there? He said, no, we have an appointment. And we went there, and what was surprising, they also know about what's going on in Kashmir. Only thing is that there is no pressure on India. We visited United Nations Human Rights Commission recently, as 2 months in New York. They said, we know everything. We gave them dossiers. We said, we have the dossiers. But nobody is raising a complaint. I'm happy we have President of Azad Kashmir, who himself has been a career diplomat, ambassador to China. We have head of Jamaat Islami and other politicians. But let me do a little bit of things speaking. That people of Kashmir are obliged to the people of Pakistan. They know that they feel their pain. But government of Pakistan is following a policy of ad hocism. It is not enough for me, for people of Kashmir, that the Prime Minister of Pakistan issues a statement in the United Nations or somewhere else. We had a conference today. Okay, that's fine. People of Kashmir, when they hear about it, when the press release comes, they'll be very happy. But what is the follow-up? Where is the policy? You are dealing with a fascist government in India who is following a policy of vigilantism. They don't understand the language of peace. And unless and until you have strong policy, those old mechanisms will not work. You have to have a long-term policy. You have to explain to the world what's going on. You have to explain to Danish people, to the Danish government, the governments of Europe, I know, I'm happy that Pakistan is a democratic country. In a democratic country, politicians fight. Opposition wants to take on the government, and government wants to basically defeat the opposition. But there has to be national consensus on certain issues between all political parties. And Kashmir should be a cornerstone of Pakistan's foreign policy. You can request India 100 times to get peace, they will not. You have to launch a global policy where last year we had Senator Shan and one of lady colleagues who came here, and we explained the situation for 3-4 hours. Where was the follow-up? So, this is not my idea, and these are not my words, and these are not my thoughts. Like I said, I went to Kashmir recently, I met the leadership, and these are their thoughts. And I don't know how much time I have. So, now this question of this pallet foods. So what if Maliha only put a wrong picture? So what is the big deal? The question is pallet foods happen. Okay, instead of my picture, it is your picture, so what does it matter? This was a 15-year-old girl in Shan who was looking to the window, and she was fined upon with 35 pallets. And United States, this is used for deer hunting. There was one kid who was 18 years old, and they told him after the pallet injuries, what does he want? He said he wanted to become doctor. Now he wants eyesight. We were short of ophthalmologists. India will not allow ophthalmologists, doctors beyond borders to reach Kashmir. World has to know this. And unless the problem is that if people don't know Kulan Poshwara, I as a Kashmiri am to be blamed. Why did I get it by whom I did? If world doesn't know it, whose fault it is? Pakistan is a small country. Pakistan is a country of 200 million people. Pakistan is a nuclear power. Pakistan has strategical depth and importance. And if Pakistan speaks seriously, world will listen. But my only thing is that old hard-weight policy won't work. You have to have some kind of serious action, reassessment and continue. Okay, we will fail, but ultimately one day, inshallah, we will succeed with the help of Pakistan.
I would just request you to stay on stage. I have a personal question. When did you go last to Indian Occupation?
Just 2 weeks.
2 weeks ago. Could you just tell all the audience how daily life is affected with these 700,000 groups there and all this? So if you just give a short story about the daily life, because you just came home from the...
So, like one of the ladies here said that about the education and everything. The people of Kashmir have lost that. They are not worried about education of their child. They are worried when they come in the evening whether they will see them dead or alive. That has been taken away. The personal dignity has been taken away. Any soldier can dishonor a woman walking on the road with least impunity. Any child can be victim of a trigger, just happy soldier. There is no internet, there are no communications. And there are 750,000 well-armed with automatic guns and whatever APCs in Kashmir. They have destroyed agricultural lands. Kashmir has a lot of apples, and horticulture is one of the main sources of income. They have destroyed horticultural land, agricultural lands. They have basically dishonored women. They can stop you on the field, they can check and do whatever, take you to the prison, and without recourse to the law. The people, some of them who can afford have left Kashmir. But majority of them don't have resources. They are being subjected to this kind of atrocities. And I don't know, the people whom I saw this year, when I go next year, whether they will be alive in what condition they will be. That is Kashmir. I hope I answered it.
Professor, for a very hard-pushing story about real life in Kashmir, and as you said, you've only been there the last 2 weeks, so it is latest status. Thanks a lot, and thanks a lot for traveling all the way from the United States to participate in this conference. We really appreciate. The next speaker on stage, I would like to welcome Shan who is the chairperson for the International Committee from Radikale. So she's also co-sponsoring the conference today, together with the Lennon Fund. So I would like to welcome Shan on stage.
Thank you, Ansa. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today. This conflict is fairly new to me, and I know there are so many different aspects and different issues that could be raised when it comes to Kashmir, when it comes to the conflict. I have been asked to say a little bit about the role of the UN and what can be done in an international level to work to solve this issue. I would like to make 3 points. Kashmir's right to self-determination has been recognized by all parties and all members of the United Nations, and a date for a referendum should be set. The UN has to step up to its role as a mediator and a peacekeeper, and if we cannot rely on the UN, who can we rely on? To start with the right to self-determination. The concept of right to self-determination is one of the fundamental principles in the UN Charter from 1945. Article 1 of the Charter states, the purpose of the UN is to develop friendly relations among nations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples, and to take other appropriate measures to strengthen universal peace. It was actually in Denmark that the right to self-determination was used for one of the first times. After the Second World War, the people living on both sides of the German-Danish border was given the right to choose which country they wanted to belong to via a referendum. Obviously, the situation was a lot different than what it is today. At that time, Germany had no right to interfere. They had lost the war, so they had nothing to say in that matter. And today we see that it's a conflict between India and Pakistan, as has been said, two nuclear powers, so we are at a very different level. But nevertheless, the political circumstances that Kashmiris deserve that a date is set for a referendum. Regarding the UN and the UN resolution, half a year from now, the resolution number 47, which recommends a free and impartial plebiscite to determine the future of Kashmir, will celebrate its 17th birthday, without it coming closer to a resolution of the conflict. In 1948, the United Nations Commission for India and Pakistan was established with 3 roles. 1, to investigate the fact that gave rise to the Kashmir dispute. 2nd, exercise any mediatory influence likely to smooth away difficulties to carry out directions given by the Security Council. And 3rdly, report on the progress of reporting on the progress of executing the advice and directions of the Security Council. However, since the conflict between India and Pakistan over Kashmir in 1965, little has been done by the UN Security Council to solve the conflict. In my opinion, it's time that the conflict is brought to the table once again at the Security Council. The Security Council needs to take responsibility for bringing India, Pakistan, and Kashmir to the table for real negotiations. The UN High Commissioner on Human Rights, who spoke on the 13th of September 2016 during the Human Rights Council in Geneva, said, I believe an independent, impartial, and international mission is now needed crucially, and that it should be given free and complete access to establish an objective assessment of the claims made by the two sides. I think it's crucial that the UN is giving access to Kashmir to make sure that human rights are complied with from both sides. As long as India and Pakistan keep blaming each other for violating human rights without a third-party verification, tensions will remain. And coming to the UN, what if the UN fails, as we have seen it has done with this conflict and in many other conflicts, as Israel-Palestine, for instance? I think it's difficult at the moment to imagine such a commission being established. So what role would the EU play? It wouldn't be the first time that EU engaged in international conflicts. Probably the most well-known being the settlement of the border dispute between Serbia and Kosovo after the war in former Yugoslavia. But such a decision would require a lot of lobbying from member countries and other non-member countries, and I don't think that the conflict is so present at the moment that the EU want to engage in such a commitment. So that leaves us with national governments, and it leaves us with national politicians. So I think it's very vital that you have these conferences around Europe, around the world, so that we politicians can listen to your arguments and learn about the Kashmir situation. So once again, thank you, Anza, for inviting us. Thank you.
Inviting teams, so thank you also very much for inviting everybody. So thanks a lot, Shan, and hopefully we can engage other governments, other policies, and other parliaments where we can have these kind of conferences, so we can at least enlighten people about the situation in Kashmir and about the forces and what kind of stuff they're doing there, basically. So this is just a first step, and hopefully we will have more conferences and seminars in Denmark and all over Europe. So the next speaker on stage, I would like to welcome one of our young leaders from UK, Muzammal Ayub Thakur from United Kingdom. A warm welcome.
I don't speak Danish, but I think good afternoon is good eftermiddag. Dr. Imtiaz has said pretty much everything that I wanted to say, so there really isn't much extra that I can add on to it. Even though the pellet issues are a very recent issue in Kashmir, it's something which is very serious because we haven't really, it's unprecedented. As he mentioned, that these are used on animals. Pellets are supposed to be used on animals, and they're used on young children, as young as 4, 5, 6. I was in Kashmir when Burhan Wani was martyred, and then I was there again the following year, so I'm pretty familiar with what was happening in the hospital. Dr. Imtiaz, in fact, I was one of those people that was in SMHS hospital, in Sora hospital, trying to help people. But because I was there, I can tell you certain stories. So I won't go into the political nature of the conflict. There are people much well versed than I that can tell you about the future of Kashmir and the political situation and scenarios. What I'll do is I'll tell you a couple of stories instead. Personal stories that I've seen myself. In fact, I was in Pakistan. I had just come back from Kashmir and I was asked to speak at an event. And one of the ideas that I had was to mention not about what's been going on, but just mentioning the names of those people that have been killed in that summer. And I had just asked a friend of mine to send me on WhatsApp a message of all the names of the people. And I remember that the 48th name was Azad Thakur. And Azad Thakur was a cousin of mine, and I had no idea that he was killed until that very moment. So the communication in Kashmir is very limited. You are not able to find out. I mean, we're not talking about the international world. We're talking about from one village to another village, from one city to another city, one town to another town. Relatives don't know if their family members are still alive. I was in the hospital and I met some of these pellet victims, some as young as 4 years old. You see these kids.
I just want to clarify, in Danish, pellet, it's howl. You know, when we go on hunting, so we have these howl where there's 200 or 300 dead birds, so when we do that kind of hunting. So we're talking about howl and shooting with howlgewehr. So that's just to clarify if the Danes didn't understand the pellet word, it is howl.
These pellets, they don't just hit you, and they don't just kill you. You're lucky if you get killed. I'm telling you this, you are lucky if you get killed. Because when you're left with pellets inside your heart, and the doctor tells you that you cannot have surgery because if that pellet goes here or there, the person's going to die. There was another case of a young woman, I guess she must have been 20 years old, 21 years old. She was shot in the back, and it had lodged in her, for anybody that's a doctor, it had lodged in her vertebra, in her L1, I think. And the doctor said, she was in a coma. The doctor said that we can't perform surgery on her, again, because she could lose her life. And even if we did perform surgery, and it was a success, she's lost the ability to walk. There was a young boy, you know the ATM, the cash machines that you have? He was found with shot dead with 350 pellets in his stomach. 350 pellets in his stomach. There has been nearly 500,000 pellets that have been fired in Kashmir over that period, in that summer. 500,000 pellets. The United Nations, there is a military observer group that is based in Srinagar. And there was also MSF, Doctors Without Borders. They're also based in Kashmir. A friend and I, optimistically, we thought that we would pay them a visit and ask them to observe. That's their job. The Doctors Without Borders office was closed, and there was a guard there. He said, well, they will, as soon as the conflict started, they all went to Delhi to be safe. The same with the United Nations military observer group that was there. There was nobody present. So who are we supposed to yell at? Who are we supposed to ask? We talk about the international community, but when we can't even tell the people that are residing there what our issues are, that my cousin was killed, or my father is arrested, or my neighbor is buried somewhere, we have no means, no opportunity to complain to anybody, nobody impartial at least. You know, recently they've had these, just as a side note, braid chopping. The criminals are cutting off people's hair. And initially people thought that it must be the handiwork of, these petty criminals. It's come about, certain information has come around, that it's fear-mongering. Trying to create panic and fear among people. So that, because at the moment people aren't afraid of the army anymore. I mean, what's the worst that they can do? Kill you? But the problem is that when you have an unidentified perpetrator, that is something to be feared. And very soon, they will start abducting people. This is what the fear is in Kashmir right now. That at the moment, they're drugging people and cutting off their hair. What's next? Kidnapping. I know that I probably don't have that much time, although I have some time. Okay. I want to also mention that the weapons that are used and the laws that are used inside Kashmir are not used anywhere else in India. For a moment, let's assume, for a moment, that Kashmir is run according to the same constitution as India, and it's supposedly, allegedly, part of India. You have the riots that happened in India. There are riots happening everywhere in India. In Punjab recently, a few months ago, they didn't use pellets, they used water cannons. And a lot of the police officers were just standing by, watching like this, not doing anything, just waiting for it to subside. People were setting buildings on fire in Punjab. They didn't use pellets on them. That luxury is only for the Kashmiris. To be blinded, to be killed. Human shields, this is another issue. The human shield is, if you've seen some of these pictures, I wish I had a pen drive with me that I could show everybody. The human shield, they tied up a gentleman to the front of a car, and they not paraded him, they didn't want to show him off. They didn't want anybody to throw stones on the army vehicles. So they put a young boy on the front of that car. This is not something new. In fact, it's happened to me. Not that I've sat on the front of the car, but my car was hijacked. I was made to drive through an area where there were armed rebels, and the army wanted a civilian car to travel so that the armed rebels would not fire on a civilian car. So it was supposed to be a disguise. It happened twice. It's twice happened to me. One on my way to my village, and the other on my way to another area called Brain. I want to tell you another story of a young boy that I met in the hospital. And I asked him, you know, how did this happen? I wanted to find as much information as possible so that we could relay the information to the outside world. We have friends in different TV networks and papers, so we wanted to let them know. And I said, how did you lose your eyesight? There was one eye. He said, I was out trying to find my younger brother, making sure that he wasn't stone pelting, making sure that he was safe. And suddenly, blind flash, and my eye started hurting. I didn't know what happened to me. Some neighbors picked me up, took me to the hospital. And I said to him, well, what now? What are you going to do now? And he said, well, God has blessed me with another eye. So now I'm going to go back out, and now I'm going to stone pelt with my young brother. You see, the violence that is being perpetrated inside Kashmir, from the Indian army, from the armed forces, from these occupational military forces inside Kashmir, is encouraging young people to react, to defend ourselves, to defend the honor of our families and our sisters and our brothers and everybody else around us, our neighbors.
Okay, I think we'll start off with the second part of the conference. And again, on stage, I would like to invite one of our young leaders from Tehreek Kashmir in UK, Zafar Qureshi Saab. Welcome on stage.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, good afternoon. Thank you, honorable guests, my dear friends. It's really a great privilege to be here today again after about a year, meeting in Zira last year and talking about Kashmir. As Muzammil said, there's not much really left to be said after hearing Professor Ambrose and the rest of the speakers here about the atrocities that happen in Kashmir. There is no doubt, or even a second thought, that the issue of Kashmir is not just a bilateral or an issue that's within a civil rights of India, but it is an international human rights issue. It's an issue that's affecting over 13 million people of the territory who've been denied their right of self-determination. The basic human rights, as Amy was saying earlier, the Human Rights Directive, that's been ratified by India twice. Our basic rights to determine our future. Our basic rights for freedom of speech, freedom of press, to live in a peaceful manner have been defined. India has been oppressing the people, killing over 100,000 people in the last 30 years. We've heard about the stories, the cases of the human rights violations that are taking place in Kashmir. And I think we'll keep on hearing throughout today of the violations that India is committing. The key question remains answered is, what about us, the people who are outside Kashmir? What is our role, what is our responsibility to ensure that the people of Kashmir have the right of self-determination? The people of Kashmir have been provided an opportunity to live in peace. The people of Kashmir can live truly a dignified life. My dear friends, we're here today. We're gathered, we're expressing ourselves, we're talking, we've got freedom of speech. These are the things which my people of Kashmir have been dreaming of for the last 30, especially last 30 years. I've got an 8-year-old daughter who lives in Srinagar, along with her 2 sisters. I was speaking to her a couple of months ago over the phone during the uprising. She's studying in a primary school where most of all the students are under 14 years old. The Indian army had barged into the school, thrown a tear gas shells. These are 14-year, 11-year, 8-year-old girls that we're talking about, where the Indian army went in, throwing the tear gas,
I just want to clarify, Zafar is living in exile in United Kingdom. So his family is in Indian occupied Kashmir, and Zafar is living in England. So.
But yes, just to clarify, alhamdulillah, we get the opportunity, I haven't seen them recently, my daughter, but they have children, they're living in Srinagar. I've got 3 daughters. And I get that first-hand information. I was saying, her school, the Indian Army had gate crashed in, thrown a tear gas. All the 50 students who were all under 14 years of age had to suffer through that poisonous tear gas. What was their, what had they done? These are 18-year-old students, these are 10-year-old girls, these are 12-year-old girls who've got nothing, who were there trying to get some education. Education in an environment where the schools are shut for 7 to 8 months of the year. Their last hope is to gain something, learn something, do something on the future, and the Indian government is taking them away. This is just tip of an iceberg. We've been hearing about the 2016 uprising. I was speaking with some of the volunteers last year who were in the hospitals, helping out the victims of the Paladins. And one of the things that, cases that came through, and they sent these streaming live to me or WhatsApp video. A 21-year-old girl who was hit by pallets was brought into the Sora Medical Hospital where the volunteers were there helping them out. She has been tied down to the table, not just because she couldn't take the pain, because of the lack of the medical facilities which the Indian government had stopped into Kashmir. She had to be operated. Those painful pallets had to be taken out one by one. I could hear that agony, that pain, that crying, that shouting that she had to suffer through while going through that surgery without any anesthesia. Is that the human rights that the India declares that it follows? Is that the human rights that India has ratified and is following? Is that the democracy? Where's the right of those people of Jammu and Kashmir to that peaceful life? To that life that wanted to be dignified? So what is our role? And that's the key question. In order to define what our role in the European Union is, my dear, one thing I want to make clear is the ultimate solution to the issue of Kashmir is the right of self-determination in a peaceful manner. It is not a war, it is not pallets, it's not bullets, it's not killing of the people of Kashmir. It is a peaceful right of self-determination, as promised by the international world in the United Nations with India and Pakistan. Unfortunately, the way it seems at the moment is we are getting to the brink of a war with 2 nuclear nations against each other's throats for over 70 years, not just 70 years, but for over 70 years. The nuclear threat is real. It is not an assessment of the international government. It is a real threat where both countries have a nuclear capability. And this nuclear war is not just going to affect India or Pakistan. The next war between India and Pakistan is not just going to be an ordinary, it might end up being a world war nuclear, which will definitely involve Europe, Asia, Middle East. It is not going to be a catastrophe just limited to India, Pakistan, or the people of Kashmir, but to the whole wide world. As European nations, it is our responsibility to make sure that we enforce India to ensure the human rights violations of stop. We pave a way to make sure that the people of Kashmir have been given right of self-determination. I had an opportunity last week to be in the European Parliament with the Prime Minister of Kashmir. And what I saw there was a tremendous effort that we have been doing through Britain, through Norway, through Denmark, the Norwegian Prime Minister, but I still do believe there is a lot more that we can do. We need to be starting lobbying with our parliamentarians, making sure that the issue of Kashmir has been not just socialized, but we have actually got advocacy through the parliamentarians about the issue of Kashmir. We're enforcing the government of India to make sure the human rights violations in Kashmir have been stopped. The draconian laws like AFSPA, Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which allows the Indian Army to commit atrocities to the people of Kashmir with full impunity and with no repercussions. These laws have been stopped. There's no harm in doing trade with India. European Union at the moment, we are looking forward, the whole of European Union is looking forward to trading with India because of the Brexit issues. But what we as a people of Kashmir ask you to do is liaise with your NGOs, liaise with your councillors, liaise with your parliamentarians, speak at your academics, universities, create an awareness of the human rights violations that's happening in Kashmir, put a pressure on the governmental organizations through whether that's fair trade routes, whether that's through trade agreements, making sure that the Indian government is actually adhering to the human rights directives that it has ratified. People of Kashmir have been given an opportunity to live a peaceful life until the day we attain our right of self-determination, until the day we get to choose whether we want to be with India or whether we want to be with Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Zafar. It is a great honor for me that we have such capacities in our youth, Muzammil and Zafar and Tehreek, who are ready to take over the leadership of the Kashmir issue and raise all these issues and all this in different areas. And we just heard Zafar's been in the European Parliament and raised the issue. And for him, I think it was in January or February, we had a 3-hour session in the British Parliament about Kashmir. So it's a big honor that we have this youth who take up these issues and place it in different areas, in different parliaments all over Europe. So it's a big honor for me, a big honor for Tehreek Kashmir, Denmark, and Danish Pakistani Affairs Council to have you guys here among us. Thank you. The next speaker I would like to invite on stage is the Honorable Abdul Rashid Durabi Sahab, who is the member Legislative Assembly in Azad Jammu Kashmir. He is the spokesperson for Azad Jammu Kashmir Legislative Assembly, and he has been the chairperson for Jamaat Islami in that area for many, many years. So a big hand to Abdul Rashid.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Salatu wassalamu ala Rasulil Kareem wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Mr. Chairman and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, it is my great privilege to be here this evening on this conference, which is being organized by Tehreek Kashmir, Europe and Denmark. I congratulate Brother Ghalib Sahab, Brother Asad Manzoor Sahab, and their teams, and colleagues and their teams, and all of you who organized this conference. And it is our honor that we have with us present state of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, Sardar Masood Khan, who is president of state of Azad Jammu and Kashmir presently, and who is grandson of our founding president, Sardar Muhammad Ibrahim Khan, who led our struggle in 1947. When Indian forces occupied the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and the Kashmiri stood up, they revolted against this occupation and started a struggle, a liberation struggle, an armed struggle. And Sardar Sahab has stated in his book that about 70,000 armed, battle-tested Mujahideen and freedom fighters, they participated in this struggle. They have already experienced of Second World War, and they stood against this illegal occupation, and they got liberated for third of Kashmir, which is known as Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan. Freedom fighters were proceeding to hold the control of Srinagar, the capital of the state, when India went to the United Nations and demanded that this fight should be over and United Nations should intervene to settle this issue peacefully. On India's request, United Nations Security Council resolution was adopted. In those resolutions, there were three major steps were offered to the Kashmiris. Number one, there will be a ceasefire among the fighting groups. Number two, demilitarization of the state. And number three, Kashmiris should be given a chance to exercise their right of self-determination through a plebiscite under the purpose of the United Nations. Ceasefire took place. UN observers have been deployed to monitor this ceasefire and any untoward situation was still there in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, in Pakistan and India, where they with their assigned duties, plebiscite administrator, and a mechanism was adopted by the United Nations. But unfortunately, India did not cooperate with that mechanism and defied its commitments and pledges which she has made to the Kashmiris and to the international community. Instead of cooperating with United Nations Security Council resolutions, India tried to change the demography of the state of Jammu and Kashmir and committed massacres of the Kashmiris. Only 6th November of 1947, and this incident has been reported in different international newspapers at that time. 250,000 Kashmiris in Jammu region, they have been butchered, they have been massacred, and million others they have pushed out from their houses, who are living in Pakistan and in diaspora, in number of 2.5 million. Since then, Kashmiris are striving for peaceful settlement of this issue. Kashmiris only demand that they should be given right of self-determination. India and international community to fulfill their pledges. Pakistan, as a party to the dispute, has been advocating our cause and has been backing over this just struggle on political and diplomatic front. There have been rounds of negotiation in between India and Pakistan. But every time India tried to gain just time and to maneuver a permanent occupation and hold of the state, imposing different draconian laws and deploying more than 700 troops. The story of killings and tortures we have heard by Dr. Imtiaz and our young leaders, Nazam Ali Fakar and Zafar Qureshi. Still, Kashmiris are determined. As I have said, that Kashmiris, they wish a peaceful settlement. And you can imagine their peacefulness, their approach to the peaceful solution, that when United Nations Security Council adopted resolutions giving pledge to the Kashmiris, 70,000 armed and trained militants, freedom fighters, they laid down their guns. And since then they are waiting for any peaceful resolutions. What is happening in occupied Kashmir, it is very concerning for the people living in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, the Kashmiris living in Pakistan, in Europe, in America, in diaspora, elsewhere in the world. And we have strong bonds with our Pakistani brothers. Relationship of culture, religion. 2.5 million of our refugees, they are part and parcel of the Pakistani societies. In every town, in every village, they have accommodated our refugees. But when our brother and sister, they hear the tales of miseries and torture of our brothers and sisters coming across the line of control, one can imagine the aspirations of Kashmiris living on this side of the line of control. That is why since 1990, on many occasions, hundreds and thousands of Kashmiris, and especially youth, they came out in the streets of Muzaffarabad, Rawalakot, and they started marches to the line of control to violate this unjust line which has been drawn on the chest of the Kashmiris. To contain these mobs, our security forces, they tried to contain these mobs. Many casualties, many youth, they got killed, and many hundred youths, they got injured in these exercises. Once again, the volatile situation in our part of Kashmir persuaded our leadership when our president goes to any public gathering, the youth and mobs, they question that your grandfather, he led the liberation movement. It is time to complete that process, and you should come forward. Hundreds and thousands of youths, they have come to the offices of the political parties and got registered their names, demanding that our leadership should chart out any program so that we should march in millions of number to join our brothers. So these are the sentiments of our part of Kashmir. I have been given topic, hurdles in the resolution of the Kashmir problem. Number one hurdle is unjust attitude of India. Non-compliance of Indian attitude with United Nations resolutions. And second hurdle is a pathetic attitude of international community. Whenever such gatherings pass resolutions, whenever we meet diplomats, I have honor to visit different delegations. One of our delegation was led by Nawaz Rasulullah Khan in 1994, and our founding president Sardar Ibrahim Khan and I was part of that delegation. As Fotograf and other parliamentarians. We visited all Europe, Western Europe, and Muslim world. We met foreign ministers, we met think tanks, we met international parliamentary affairs committees, we met intellectuals. Everywhere we have been advised to keep restraint. Everywhere we have been encouraged that a sense of concern is there about the ongoing situation in Kashmir. But everywhere we have been told that our multinational companies are going to invest in India. We are not able to deprive them the opportunities of investment. I am here to convey you that any investment needs peace, prosperity. And what is going on in Kashmir and what is strategy being applied by the Narendra Modi government. The region of subcontinent is being dragged towards the war, towards the devastation. And if any such untoward situation occurs there, we can imagine how any investment can flourish. So I am here to request our dignitaries, member of parliaments, intellectuals. We are very grateful for giving this opportunity today. This is great encouragement for us. But we need more. This is a very decisive moment, and we need your help. On the question of humanity, on the question of basic human rights, first of all, our demand is that all international community, the governments and the civil society, they should pursue upon India to stop these human rights violations. And second, our demand is that India should be persuaded to fulfill its commitment and pledges so that people of Kashmir should be given right of self-determination. I appreciate the contribution of Tehreek Kashmir, Brother Ghalib Saab, his team, Adil Saab, Manzoor Saab, and Fahim Saab in UK, and Mia Saab, he is chief partner. He is our सरपरस्त आला है, chief partner of Alhamdulillah, all community and all good efforts here. And Tehreek Kashmir has been extended all the European countries, and European countries, EU, you know better than me the importance of EU. After exclusion of the Great Britain from EU, EU is very important for Kashmir cause. So I request our brother and sister to persuade and to apprise the leaders and member of parliaments and think tanks about the ongoing situation there collectively. We have different parties. I belong to Jamaat Islami. Some brothers, they belong to Muslim Leagues. Some belong to Muslim Conference, People's Party. But Tehreek Kashmir resembles a symbol of unity. And I was part of that consultation process in 80s. When this Tehreek Kashmir was founded, at that time there were many parties, and our brothers in Britain and in Europe who belong to Jamaat Islami, they demanded that we should establish Jamaat Islami here and there. But we refused, and we just said there should be a common platform, so that everybody, without hesitation, come and participate. Extra partisan platform, that is Tehreek Kashmir at the moment. Alhamdulillah. They have lobbied in Great Britain, UK, and Alhamdulillah, this issue was debated in the British Parliament. Our other colleagues, MPs and Lords, we are grateful to all of them. And now this very, very important platform, and I am very glad to see our educated and committed brothers, Alhamdulillah, who have organized this event. मेरी बहुत दुआएं आपके लिए, अपनी बहनों के लिए, अपने भाइयों के लिए कि आप सब यहाँ पे आए और आपने हमें मौका दिया मुलाकात का, और हमारे आपसे मैं यही गुजारिश करूँगा कि आप इनके हाथ मजबूत करें। यहाँ मुख्तलिफ तबसरे होते हैं, बातें होती हैं कि ये कॉन्फ्रेंसें करने का क्या फ़ायदा, ये सेमिनार करने का क्या फ़ायदा, लेकिन ये जो सारी सरगर्मियाँ हैं इसके असरात मुरतब होते हैं कश्मीर के अंदर। सदर साहब की तकरीर, आज जो रेजोल्यूशन होगा, इसकी आवाज़ जब श्रीनगर में पहुँचेगी तो उसके नतीजे में वहाँ ये एहसास पैदा होगा कि हम तनाव नहीं। Adopted by in this building of Danish Parliament, it will convey a sense of encouragement to the suffering brothers and sisters in our country. Scandinavian countries, they have been champion of the human rights. And they have played a very historic role in conflict resolution, Oslo Declaration, the issue of outstanding issue of Palestine. It's rethinking and what was a solution proposed and negotiated in Oslo. So in this context, we request and we hope that you will play a leading role in case of right and self-determination of Kashmir. I am very grateful to our investor, Tehreek Sahab, Safi Sahab, Dr. Imtiaz Sahab, and by Kyari Sahab, and our president. He is our honor, alhamdulillah. He is a visionary leader. He has contributed a lot being the investor of Pakistan at the national level, highlighting our cause of Kashmir. He is here with us. It is great honor for us. Once again, I thank you all. After Dawana.
Thanks a lot, Abdul Rashid Raju sir. Thanks a lot for coming all the way from Pakistan to Denmark to join this conference. And I would like to thank also the Udani students this time to giving us the visa, the Schengen visa for Abdul Rashid Raju sir. For people from Pakistan to travel to Denmark. Even the cultural visas have been banned. We are in category 5 now. So I would really like to thank Udani students for giving us this opportunity to have Ghulam Muhammad Safi Saab and Ghulam Safi. So a big hand to Udani students. So the next guest on stage, before I will ask him to come to the stage, I just want to remark. People who know me, or have known me for 40, 50 years, or how much, I have friends sitting here who have known me for 45 years. Most of you guys know me as a strong ox. You have never seen me tremble or crying or anything else. But when I see our next guest, when I meet him, when I met him last time, I had tears in my eyes when I heard him. And when I see him now, I really almost cried sitting here thinking about who I'm going to call on stage as next guest. So those who have seen him 1 year ago have seen him as a strong man, but you can see now he has been into a heart surgery just a few months ago. He traveled all the way from Pakistan in a very ill status and came here. I would like to invite on stage Ghulam Muhammad Safi Sahab, convener, all parties who are here.
In the name of Lord Almighty. Mr. President,
ladies and gentlemen. The issue of Kashmir has remained unresolved for the last 7 decades. Mr. Abdul Rashid Turabi highlighted a few points about why it so happened. Why couldn't the issue be resolved in so many years? But besides what he mentioned and said, there is a paralyzed United Nations organization which could not implement its own resolutions, which were unanimously passed by India, Pakistan, international community, and the United Nations. But since one of the parties, that is India, is stronger enough, she dictated whatever she wanted to dictate, and thus these resolutions could not get implemented. Resolutions get implemented if those resolutions concern weaker parties, not the stronger parties. Then we also had the lukewarm attitude according to this issue of Jammu and Kashmir by big powers. That's why it became an impediment, a hurdle in the resolution of the issue of Jammu and Kashmir. Then the stubbornness and intransigence on the part of India. She reneged out of its promises she made. She did not fulfill even a single promise she made regarding holding a plebiscite and referendum in Jammu and Kashmir to ascertain the wishes and aspirations of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Then there was weakness on the part of Pakistan as compared to India. Pakistan tried its utmost, and at times she said what shouldn't have been said. One of the presidents of Pakistan once said, "We want the resolution of Jammu and Kashmir anyway, even if we'll have to keep the UN resolutions at bay." So they wanted the resolution of Jammu and Kashmir. But today, when we are talking in what had been once the Parliament Hall of Denmark, all others must know that whether any other country knows anything about Kashmir or not, but Denmark knows that Jammu and Kashmir is an issue, and an issue which has not erupted yesterday. It is there since 1947. We have seen Denmark in United Nations Military Observer Group for India and Pakistan, way back in 1949. Denmark knows that
there had been discussions in the United Nations Security Council about military observer group, which is still in Indian occupied Kashmir, in Azad Kashmir, in India, in Pakistan, with a difference that Pakistan allows these people to work freely, while as India wants the UNMOGIP, the United Nations Military Observer Group, to be abandoned. Because as one of the speakers here said, that India says, Brother Asi said, that India says Jammu and Kashmir is an integral part of India. President Masood Khan had been asking them questions. He once made a program in the Third Committee of the United Nations and arranged it in such a way that I got a chance to speak for the people of Jammu and Kashmir in the United Nations. It was all because of him, because of our President, Mr. Masood Khan. He asked numerous questions to Indians. Can you just give us a date when the people of Jammu and Kashmir decided to accede to India? Can you tell us, Mr. Ambassador of India, that how did Jammu and Kashmir become a part of India? Was any referendum held? Any plebiscite that took place? No. Well, let me also make it very clear that we have the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir here. Pakistan has its own president. Mr. Mamnoon Hussain is the President of Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Sardar Masood Ahmad Khan is the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. It's not a part of Pakistan as yet. It's not a part of India as yet. The people have to decide. Unless and until the people of Jammu and Kashmir decide about their fate and future, it will remain disputed. The presence of President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir here denotes and explains that the entire territory of Jammu and Kashmir is disputed. It does not belong to India or Pakistan as yet. People may decide in favor of Pakistan. Maybe people decide in favor of India, but let the people decide. One very strong message that will go out from this hall tonight is that people thought that India has succeeded in painting Kashmiris, the sufferers, as terrorists, and India, the terrorist, as innocent, as docile, as sufferer. But I'm sure each one of you, men and women, every participant, must have a feeling today that Kashmiris are sufferers. All that what Professor Dr. Imtiaz said, what Muzammil said, what Zafar said, what Asi said, what Turabi Saab said, and all other speakers. This lady just in front of me, Zainab, Zania, Charlotte, Sharaf, each one of them, they spoke from their heart. We as Kashmiri sufferers, thank you very much. You may be small in number, but that does not matter for us. Even one single voice can change the world, I'm sure. And when we have men and women together talking about the cause of Kashmir, the genuineness of the cause of Kashmir, the righteousness of the cause of Kashmir, we are sure it may take some time, but finally the truth will prevail, inshallah. Well, such conferences are very important, though, as Puranisar rightly said, many people would say, so what happened? Nothing changed. It was a Friday, people were dying and being martyred in Jammu and Kashmir, and on Saturday, we found people crying there and dying there and being massacred there and tortured there. So nothing changed. So do the people want everyone to be silent against this tyranny? Or should there be some voices raised against the tyranny? So we think we have a better choice to raise voice against occupants, or against occupying powers. And what we would suggest, and I endorse the views of Professor Dr. Imtiaz, Pakistan will have to redouble its efforts. Pakistan has been doing a lot. We are thankful to the people of Pakistan and the government of Pakistan. But we think that mobilization of the international community is very vital and important at this point in time. We congratulate Pakistan on having succeeded to achieve a seat in the Human Rights Commission. And you have now a better chance, you are now better placed to highlight the human rights violations that are being perpetrated against the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And with that, I thank you very much.
And next, I would like to welcome on stage our newly appointed ambassador, Pakistani ambassador in Denmark, His Excellency Zulfikar Virdezi Saab. Everybody, a big hand. Thanks a lot.
Honorable President Azad Kashmir, Sardar Masood Mansa,
10-year stamp, member of Parliament, Danish Parliament, and a strong voice on human rights and of principles. Charlotte Burgess, Kashmiri brothers and sisters, we've come from not just all over Denmark, I would say, but also from US, from UK, and in such large numbers, and from other parts of the world. Representatives from civil society here today, I see a lot of them, and think tanks, from civil society, from the Tehreek in Kashmir, of course, Mr. Manzoor Sen, Mr. Mir Munir Saab, Mr. Kasi. I must acknowledge all of these because it might seem like a long introduction, but these are efforts to be deserved to be acknowledged. These are people who've come here, who put in their effort because they believe in a certain cause. So we must acknowledge them and we must appreciate this presence. So thank you very much for all of you. I think earlier speakers have spoken on different aspects of the Kashmir issue, but they all had one thing in common. The heart-rending, the passionate accounts, the conviction of the leaders here, this is all had one thing in common. It came from the heart. And this is where, because they believe in certain cause. And they have covered the aspects of Kashmir from various angles. And we have a very eloquent, a very firm believer and an honorable figure here, Mr. Manzoor Khan Sahab, who will speak after me and highlight it even more. I will simply touch upon some aspects from the Pakistan government's perspective, how it approaches the issue. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been Pakistan's policy to pursue friendly relations with all its neighbors. We want a peaceful resolution of all outstanding issues with India, including the Jammu and Kashmir dispute, which is the core issue between the two countries. It's not just a core issue between the two countries, it's also the cornerstone of Pakistan's foreign policy. It has been the cornerstone of Pakistan foreign policy, it is the cornerstone of Pakistan foreign policy, and it will remain the cornerstone of Pakistan foreign policy until it is resolved. However, our overtures to address this issue, to talk to our neighbor, to address it through dialogue, has not elicited a positive response. The continuing Indian denial of UN Security Council resolutions on Jammu and Kashmir dispute and the gross human rights violations in the IOK by occupation forces is a matter of serious concern. The repeated ceasefire violations by Indian forces are a clear manifestation of aggressive designs. The falsified claims and belligerent statements, coupled with unprovoked ceasefire violations, reflect an attempt to escalate the situation, to create tension, not only in the highly sensitive and internationally disputed region of Jammu and Kashmir, but to undermine regional security and peace. This is also an attempt to divert the attention of the international community for the grave situation in the occupied Kashmir, where a reign of terror has been unleashed against innocent, defenseless, unarmed, peaceful people. The Indian forces have been engaged in ceasefire violations on the line of control and the working boundary, which has resulted in the loss of 47 innocent civilians and injuries for 159 persons in 2017 alone. The villages in populated areas are being deliberately targeted. Heavy mortar fire is also being used. In the last 2 weeks alone, in this month, first 2 weeks, it has resulted in the shahadat of 15 innocent civilians, including 6 women, and injury to 43 others. We urge the UN Security Council to take immediate notice of these violations. The United Nations Military Observer Group, a reference was made to this earlier by one of the speakers, has the mandate to monitor these violations. Pakistan has always extended full cooperation to this. One more gap has come to be known. It is India which has been creating hurdles in its smooth functioning. Indian actions reflect and are motivated by an exaggerated view of its own capacity and monistic designs, but it is also emboldened by false perception of international endorsement. Its mistaken belief is fraught with unforeseen dangers in an already volatile strategic environment. It is for this reason that the Prime Minister of Pakistan, in his address at the United Nations General Assembly, where all the world leaders get together every year in September, and the highest level of the leadership of Pakistan, the Prime Minister, forcefully asserted that there should be no doubt that Pakistan is firmly resolved to defend itself against any aggression against its people and the territory. We urge the international community to play its role and call upon India to respect international norms and of interstate conduct, stabilize the situation along the line of control, and meaningfully address Jammu and Kashmir dispute, which remains the root cause of conflict and instability in the region. While all this goes on, in the occupied Kashmir itself, more than 200 civilian, unarmed, peaceful civilians have been killed, over 20,000 injured, many in critical condition. There has been mass blinding of Kashmiri youth by pellet guns, and many of the earlier speakers have alluded to that. Curfew has remained imposed in occupied Kashmir for over 100 days. The use of civilians as human shields, and the pamphlet says that there on your chairs also, the pictures of that. Use of civilians as human shields in Indian occupied Kashmir and endorsement by the Indian Army chief reflects a jingoistic mindset. And is a case in point in the continuing violation of human rights in IOK by Indian occupation forces. The true leadership of the Kashmiris, the Hurriyat leadership, is continually imprisoned or placed under house arrest. They are barred from offering Friday prayers. And we meet today on a Friday in these historic premises. Internet services continue to remain shut down for long periods. And the speaker had pointed this out, the lack of information that can be spread across. Let me reiterate that as articulated by the Prime Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Shahid Khan Abbasi, in his address to the UN General Assembly, which he called for an international investigation in India's war crimes in IOK. And he requested the UN Secretary General and send an inquiry commission in Indian occupied Kashmir to verify the nature and extent of human rights violations and secure punishment for those responsible and provide justice and relief to the victims. He also called upon the UN Secretary General to appoint a special envoy on Kashmir. As for Pakistan, we remain committed to a just and peaceful resolution of the Jammu and Kashmir dispute in accordance with the aspirations of the people of Kashmir as enshrined in the UN Security Council resolutions. Pakistan, and make no mistake about it, will continue to extend political, diplomatic and moral support to the Kashmiri people in their just struggle. The international community, particularly those countries for which human rights are a priority in their foreign policy, should step forward to bring an end to the miseries of Kashmiris. And what could be a more stark example of human rights violations than what's going on in occupied Kashmir? There is also a crying need for an amicable resolution of the dispute in accordance with the wishes of the people as enshrined in the UN Security Council resolutions. We meet here today in these hallowed grounds, in these historic premises. And the resonance of the Kashmir issue is being felt thousands of miles from where it's taking place. And it's a manifestation of the resonance of that just cause as far here, thousands of miles away. I believe that for others, but primarily due to the valiant struggle of the Kashmiri people themselves, this issue will remain alive till it is resolved and addressed. I therefore wish the conference participants every success in charting the way forward. Thank you.
Then our next and final guest, the chief guest, and it's a big honor to have His Excellency, the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir here, and I'm very thankful and grateful that he accepted our invitation to be among us here today. So I would like you all to give him a standing applause.
I begin in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most beneficent. It has been a marathon session, and with a long list of speakers. Are you ready for another speech? A long speech. I've been given 20 minutes. Shall I use them? Or shall I be a bit merciful? Anyway, Honorable Zenia Stampe, Member of Irish Parliament, Ambassador of Pakistan to Denmark, Mr. Zulfikar Bandezi, and Ansar Manzoor Hussain. I'd like to restrict my recognition to these three names, and then I'll refer to other speakers as I speak. and Tehreek and Zania's temple. My thanks to you, my gratitude, in fact. A fantastic seminar. Let me tell you that since I assumed the presidency of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, I have been to many parts of the world, to the Nordic countries, to Brussels, to Spain, to the United States, many other seminars that I attended inside Pakistan. This is the best seminar that I have attended. It was the rich content of the debate, the testimonies that we heard directly from the Indian Army. It was also the quality of the speakers. They spoke passionately, they were eloquent, articulate, they didn't waste any time. And all the audience present here were attentive to what they were saying. Therefore, Ms. Dampier, you established a new tradition, and I thank you. And thank you because you are our window to the Danish Parliament. And Mr. Ansel, let me tell you that you are a great organizer. Assemble such a large number of people from all walks of life. When it is Friday, and for the MPs, it is the fall vacation, the autumn vacation, to assemble such a large gathering speaks volumes about your own skills as an organizer. So applause for Mr. Ansel. I was here 22 years ago for the social summit. I'd come from New York, and that was a fantastic summit. And at that time, Copenhagen and Denmark demonstrated leadership. And it has had impact. In fact, the social summit was the mother of all other summits that were held in that decade. If you would recall, there was one about habitat, the other about women. Sustainable development predated it. But you're a great nation. And today I come for the seminar, and let me tell you that this trip would also be as memorable as my trip was when I participated in the social summit. I also want to pay tribute to all the speakers, in particular these young speakers who spoke about what's happening in Kashmir. And Musammal, Mr. Qureshi, Zafar Qureshi, Mr. Adil Asi, also you are here, Fahim Kiani. Who else? Who else thinks that he is young or is actually? All right. But quite a few references have been made to Azad Kashmir. Let me explain to you what Azad Kashmir is, as it was mentioned by Mr. Ghulam Muhammad Safi and also by Mr. Turabi, that Azad Kashmir is a temporary transient apparatus that we have established. We established it in 1947, on October the 24th, and on that day, we took a vow that we are establishing this quasi-sovereign state called Azad Jammu and Kashmir, but we will not integrate it to Pakistan until the people of Jammu and Kashmir have spoken as a whole. And we have kept that promise up to this day. As I explained to Ms. Zania Stempe earlier in the day, that we have a president, we have a prime minister, we have a bicameral legislature, and we have a Supreme Court and we have a High Court, all the trappings of a sovereign state, but it is not sovereign. It is not a state, it is a quasi-state. It's a quasi-state because many of our limbs are under the occupation of India. Unless that part of our body politic is liberated, we will not be a whole, we will not be complete. This must be understood. And this empathy that we have, the solidarity that we have within the nation of Jammu and Kashmir, it is not an artifice. It has not been artificially created. And their solidarity with the people of Pakistan is also a historical fact. Let me tell you, the many speakers have talked about the issue of Jammu and Kashmir, and they have clearly stated that the crux of the matter is the right to self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And why do I reiterate it? Because today, in the United Nations, 193 countries are represented, and they are peoples of the world, and peoples of the world comprise the United Nations, but 20 million people of Jammu and Kashmir do not have a persona, and they do not have representation in the United Nations. Our cause is represented by the state of Pakistan. And therefore, Pakistan is a sovereign window of Kashmiris to the United Nations and to the other international forums. Otherwise, we have no persona. The political wishes of all the peoples of the world have been ascertained, not of the Kashmiris. It would not be a misnomer to say, particularly about the people of the Indian-occupied Kashmir, that they are stateless. They do not have a state. They are not part of global citizenship because they haven't exercised their choice and they have not joined formally either India or Pakistan. The situation on the ground, it is horrendous. It has been graphically described by speaker after speaker. Let me tell you, rhetoricians, when they speak, the first part is ethos, the second is pathos, the last part is logos. But let me come to the pathos. You know, last century, here in the heart of Europe, crimes against humanity were committed, genocide took place, and war crimes were committed. I give you a testimony as the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir that those very crimes are being committed in the Indian-occupied Kashmir today. Those egregious crimes against humanity are being committed in IOK. And let me also tell you, the last century, in the interwar period, and during the war itself, appeasement took place. And appeasement is taking place today. Superpowers today, major powers responsible for the peace and security and stability of our globe, they are appeasing our tormentor, our violator of human rights. And this must be resisted as members of the international community. It is our responsibility, not only as Kashmiris, but as Europeans, and as North Americans, and as Asians, and as Africans, to resist and oppose this kind of terror, which has been unleashed on the unarmed people of Jammu and Kashmir. Let me repeat it, unarmed people of Jammu and Kashmir. People have given a long list of human rights violations. They've talked about killings and torture and incarcerations and enforced disappearances and rape as an instrument of war and mass rapes. And mass graves have been discovered, uncovered, and they've been reported and documented. But let me tell you that they do not capture a fraction of human rights violations that are taking place in the Indian occupied Kashmir. Because as some speakers pointed out, that we do not have the capacity to do that because there is an absolute information blackout imposed on the territory of Indian occupied Kashmir. Indians are violators, for God's sake, and I'm grateful to you, Mr. and to you, Charlotte. You pronounce your name differently in the Danish language. Charlotte is fine? Okay. I'm grateful to you. You took words out of my mouth. You were so precise, and your interventions were so targeted, and they were proactive. They were anchored in human rights instruments. Now let me tell you, Indians are violating the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The two covenants, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Social, Economic and Cultural Rights, Convention on Torture, and the whole list of conventions. They are also violating the international humanitarian law. International humanitarian law prescribes that in a conflict situation, you use the principles of proportionality, of precaution, of distinction. You do not kill non-combatants. And then they talked about these draconian laws, Armed Forces Special Powers Act or Public Safety Act, which give 100% immunity from prosecution to the occupation forces. And therefore, they kill and maim and torture with impunity. Somebody also mentioned that they are trying to change the demographic composition of the state so that the majority is reduced into a minority, and if ever a plebiscite takes place, its verdict should be in favor of India. Let me also tell you what Kashmir is not, in bits and pieces. Speakers who have preceded me, they have highlighted what Kashmir is not, or what Kashmir is not about. There's absolutely no terrorism right now in Kashmir. And I state this with full responsibility. And my statement is partly, if not fully, based on the statements given by Indian leaders themselves. They've deployed 700,000 troops there in the Indian occupied Kashmir. And a couple of weeks ago, one of their security commanders, a Major General, said that the total number of militants in Jammu and Kashmir or the Indian occupied Kashmir was 250, and through very successful operations we have reduced their number to 150. And he says that these militants are indigenous, and they say that as far as the line of control is concerned, which has 2 layers of barbed wires, and in between there are landmines, and there is thermal imaging, and there are motion sensors, and there is electronic surveillance. Nobody from Pakistan or from Azad Kashmir can penetrate into the IOK. If somebody ever escapes, he is neutralized in the hinterland. These are statements from one of the commanders of one of the strongest armies in the world. They need 700,000 troops to neutralize 100 people. And these Indian soldiers are armed to teeth, and the Kashmiris are unarmed. I say that the Kashmiris are the most unarmed peoples on earth because they have no supply chains for arms, either from the Indian side or for the Pakistani side. Let me also tell you that the most muscular, the most powerful nation, the preeminent nation on earth, the United States of America, has the right to defend itself by invoking Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Kashmiris do not have the right right to defend themselves. Of course, if a boy, a teenager, goes to Lal Chowk, that can be translated as Red Square, and says, what I want is azadi, freedom, he is a terrorist. And if people say, go India, go back, leave our Kashmir, what do we want? Azadi, freedom. That crowd, that individual is a terrorist. This is the definition of a terrorist. And Ms. Stanley chose your words very carefully. The fight against terrorism is being used as a pretext, as a premise to impose state terrorism in the Indian occupied Kashmir. As many speakers have pointed out, this territory, the Indian occupied Kashmir, is not an integral part of India. By any yardstick, legal, constitutional, or in accordance with international law, it's an occupied territory. And the last point that I want to make in this context is that it is not a bilateral issue. It is not an issue between India and Pakistan. It is an issue between Pakistan, India, the people of Jammu and Kashmir, and the United Nations. It's not a bilateral issue, it's a quadrilateral issue. Let me tell you that in 2005, when our advisor, Pakistan's advisor to the Prime Minister on Foreign Affairs, was traveling to Delhi, the Modi government and their foreign minister said that you could come to Delhi, but you would not talk to Kashmiris. And Sushma Swaraj, the External Affairs Minister, said that we think that Kashmiris have nothing to do with the Kashmir disputes. That's a bilateral issue. It's a bilateral issue, you can't talk to the Kashmiris. It's an oxymoron, ladies and gentlemen. It's the biggest oxymoron I have ever come across. The Kashmiris are not part of the Kashmir dispute. Our mistake. Somebody criticized, Professor Imtiaz Khan criticized, well, he in fact encouraged us to do more. But what he said, that Pakistan has to do more. When I look back, I say one of the gravest mistakes that we have committed, the people of Pakistan, the governments of the successive governments of Pakistan, is the bilateralization of the Jammu and Kashmir issue. Because we kept this issue alive. The Kashmiris have kept this issue alive up to this day. But the grave mistake is that we engaged with India on a bilateral table, and they have abused that format. They have reduced the core issue of Jammu and Kashmir to a fraction of the entire agenda, and they have acquired a veto about the timetable of Kashmir talks. When they want to start negotiations, when they do not want it, they block the entire process, scuttle the entire process. So that, I would say, has been a great mistake. We should go back to, we should come back to the international community. We should come back to Copenhagen and Oslo and Stockholm and Helsinki and Brussels and New York and Washington, D.C. We must generate that international pressure. Let me also say, that I was talking to Ms. Stamp earlier today, and I said that what is it that we want to say to the international community? What is it that we want? In fact, I highlighted 3 things that have really hamstrung the international community in regard to Kashmir. And they are India's strategic alliances with the Western countries, India's strategic alliance with the United States of America, and India's hopes, I would say, that it would somehow decelerate the process of economic progress of China. Because that's a strategic construct for the Western powers. Although the Western powers, West Europe for instance, the European Union itself, and the United States, they have very intense relationship with China. But somehow, India has pushed itself into this equation. The second thing is that many nations in the Western world, they have entered into these lucrative and profitable agreements with economic and commercial agreements. And the third thing is realpolitik, that you decide matters not on the basis of principles, not on the basis of the United Nations Charter, not on the basis of other human rights standards, but on the basis of your narrow national interests. And I think it was Mr. Safi who warned, or it was Mr. Korabi, that our world, which is based on realpolitik, would be fragile, inherently fragile. We have to go back to the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter. Let me also tell you that what do we want from the international community? What do we want from Copenhagen and Brussels? We want attention. And Ms. Stampe has given that attention to us today. Because today when I was talking to the audience, or other speakers were talking to the audience, they were not preaching to the choir. It was not that all the people who were here had already signed up for the right to self-determination of Jammu and Kashmir. The people who had questions in their minds, and our speakers responded to those questions. So what we really want is attention in the Danish Parliament. Our request to you is, and I'm sure that you will do that, let's start conversations on the sidelines of the parliamentary sessions. Or on occasions, please raise this issue on the floor of the Danish Parliament. And as a member of the United Nations, please encourage the United Nations Secretary General, the President of the Security Council, also the Human Rights Council, to be proactive on this issue. Please help us raise the profile of the Kashmir dispute in the world parliaments and in the global parliament, which is called the United Nations. Now, we also need some space in think tanks and in the media, because Mr. Professor Shan, he said, the words do not matter. Am I correct, quoting you correctly? I'd say words do matter. Words do matter. India has, of course, India is killing Kashmiris mercilessly, but it has also outstripped us, Kashmiris, and the people of Pakistan, in selling its narrative, which is based on trust. And we have the truth, and we do not have the capacity and capability to put across our point of view. In fact, when we go with our narrative, people switch off. They tend to switch off. They look the other way. Why? Because there's this communication deficit, which we need to bridge. And that's why we need presence, space in the media, the traditional media and the new media. Let me also tell you, I was talking to one of the think tanks today, and whoever received me was very cautious. Why are they cautious? They are cautious because Indians kill Kashmiris in the occupied Kashmir. And everybody who speaks up for freedom of right to self-determination is a traitor, punishable by law, and the punishment is execution. Yes, understood. And then tell the world that they are the victims and Kashmiris are the victimizers, as it was highlighted by several speakers here. And when Europeans pay attention to Kashmir or hold a seminar like this, then the Indians want to impose a gag order on them. They say you can't speak up. If you speak up, there would be consequences. They would say there would be economic consequences. Defense contracts would be cancelled. They blackmail and they intimidate. They are European and American interlocutors. They also intimidate the United Nations interlocutors. When I was talking to that lady, he used the word neutrality. That we want to remain neutral. I said, for God's sake. After a pause, I said, for God's sake, do not remain neutral between the oppressed and the oppressor. Tilt towards the oppressed, for God's sake. Because they are weak, and they are marginalized, and they are discriminated. So tilt towards the oppressed. This kind of neutrality is in fact acquiescence in the crimes against humanity. This is complicity when you look the other way. Let parliaments like Danish Parliament help Kashmiris become global citizens and help acquire their persona. To India we say, come back to the negotiating table or help us promote diplomacy. We say repeal these laws, Armed Forces Special Powers Act and Public Safety Act. We say withdraw the bulk of these forces from the Indian occupied Kashmir. Somebody used the word demilitarize. Demilitarization may not be possible, but evacuate the bulk of the forces who are terrorizing the population of Jammu and Kashmir. In their own land, Indians have made Kashmiris alien. Aliens are not treated like that. They need visa to go from one place to the other, from one city to the other. They need these permits all the time. And I'm heading towards conclusion. So your agony would be over after a while. So Professor Khan, I want to assure you one. No matter what happens, the people of Azad Kashmir and the people of Pakistan are with the people of Indian occupied Kashmir. No matter what happens, this is a vow that has been taken by generations and we will stick by it. So, let me also tell you that never underestimate the importance or the impact of the moral, diplomatic and political support that Pakistan extends to the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And some people say in desperation that we have failed, and I say banish the word of failure. You haven't failed, because if you had failed, the issue of Jammu and Kashmir would not be alive today. If you had failed, then both the people of Jammu and Kashmir be shedding their blood every day and embracing martyrdom. Let me tell you that from the outside, people have used these expressions that it's a frozen conflict, that it is a forgotten conflict. It is a forgotten conflict for the United Nations or for the international bodies. Since 1947, it is not a frozen conflict for the people of the Indian occupied Kashmir. Never ever. Every day they have to face killings and incarcerations, and every day, even as we speak today, some boys have been martyred. So it's not a frozen conflict from the point of view of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Let me also say that I do have a strategy. And that strategy includes unity within the ranks of the Kashmiris themselves. There can be dissension and diversity, but there should also be unity. We should go back to the international community, as I said earlier. We should use the increased strengths and competencies of the diaspora communities, because they are now well integrated into their countries of adoption. We should use strategically the media, and we should make Pakistan and Azad Kashmir strong states. And finally, we should reach out to civil society of the world, including the civil society of India. I hope we would succeed, because let me make this point clear, that we the Kashmiris are not begging for the right to self-determination, and we are not saying that this should be a charity handed out to us. This is our right, and no matter what happens, 5 generations of Kashmiris have given sacrifice for liberty, for freedom, for the right to self-determination. We are here to remind the international community of their responsibility as far as the Kashmiris are concerned. There would be liberty. There would be freedom. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, and all the sacrifices of the Kashmiris will never go waste. My last point is that I come from Azad Kashmir. I began my remarks with Azad Kashmir. The total territory of Azad Kashmir is 13,297 square kilometers. And I was looking at the statistics about Denmark, and you have 43,000 square kilometers, excluding Greenland. And you have 5.5 million people, and we are 5.5 million people in Azad Kashmir. We are one of the most beautiful parts of the world, and also one of the most beautiful parts of Jammu and Kashmir. I am conveying this message to the diaspora community and to the Danish guests sitting here today, that Azad Kashmir is a land of opportunity. Come and invest there. Come and invest in infrastructure, in power generation, in education, in health, in tourism, in telecommunications, in agriculture, in extractive industry. You will make profit. And you will give us some money to sustain our freedom movement. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks a lot, President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and thanks a lot for the President's office, everybody for accepting our invitation. When I look around and I see that we basically have all the youth here, we have all the dignitaries, we have all the elders, we have all kind of Kashmiris represented here. So everybody knows we have a session on Sunday in Urdu, in Taj Mahal, where everybody needs to be there with families and all the faces I see here. I want you to be there 11:45, because we will start the session exactly at 12 o'clock in Urdu. So please, everybody, be there in time. I'll just take 5 minutes. I know it will be the marathon session, but I think we should use the opportunity to have just 5 minutes of question and answer. And I would give the favor to those people who are not joining on Sunday. If they have any kind of questions to anybody sitting up here, the President, Rabi Saab, Dr. Faisal, Dr. Diasab, Nimkani Saab, Zulfikar Kadezi Saab, Safi Saab, or anybody up here, me or Zinia, just put forward the question and we'll try to answer. It is a 5-minute session only because I know everybody's tired. It's been a marathon session, but I think we should use this unique opportunity. So if you have any questions, and especially those people who are not attending on a Sunday, they can ask questions now. I know you are attending on Sunday, so you can ask the question there. You're not? Please, your name and the question and who do you want to put it to?
Assalamu alaikum, President, sir. My name is Shan. I'm the President of Tehreek, Kashmir, Sweden. My question is that we have been gathered here. You people have given your narrative. The Kashmiri's leader have highlighted the issue of Kashmir. But my suggested question in a way is that why Pakistani media is not giving that narrative in a way that the entire world knows about it. I'm not blaming media. In a way, I'm trying to highlight that. Why don't you people consult with Pakistani government and we should have an English news channel which highlight the Kashmir issue and atrocity. So we don't have to attend these kind of huge conferences. Instead, our media narrative goes on here all over the world through satellite channel and people might know about it more thoroughly.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the media in Pakistan is very vibrant, very active. It does cover the Kashmir issue. We do have an English channel. It is PTV World, as a matter of fact. But you are right. The content is not that rich, and our effort is not critical. From time to time, there is news coverage. It is event-driven, news-driven, and the social media is also very active. There are lobbying groups which are using the social media. You would agree with me that the relative success of the Kashmir campaign over the past years is because of the media. Despite all the restrictions imposed on the IOK, we were able to get some footage, some live footage, or some pictures out of Kashmir. And that has made an impact. That has impacted the coverage in the Guardian or the New York Times or Washington Post. So I do agree with you that we need to do more and we should be more organized. But one good news that I want to give you is that this realization is there in Pakistan, and there's the Safi's daughter, Shazla Safi. In fact, they have a lobbying group which is doing a great job. So we have made the beginning. We need to expand our activities and achieve the desired results.
Any other questions? Okay. Mohammed Ladisov, you just want 30 seconds before we end the conference?
That's a good news that I'm only going to speak for 30 seconds. All I'm going to say is I'm going to thank our guest, the President of Kashmir, and the President of Pakistan, and all the guests come from around the world, members of Parliament, councillors, political activists, human rights activists, in particular, Zina, the last time we met here in the Parliament. And I think we have achieved that we have held this conference after 12 months. Thank you very much, Zina. And all I'm going to say that the people are struggling for the last 17 years. They're sacrificing their blood, and we have been highlighting this issue from the last 17 years. Now I think it's the time to resolve the issue. We have done a lot to highlight the issue. We will continue to highlight it well, but it is time to resolve the issue. Second thing, that the issue of this is not the issue between India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan, I'm President of Tehreek in Europe. I travel around the Europe, and the European countries, the European government policies that India and Pakistan should resolve the issue. We say that India and Pakistan cannot resolve the issue until the international community involved. And lastly, our president said, people of Pakistan, people of Kashmir are people with occupied Kashmir. And I am saying, people of Europe, people of Denmark, people of UK, we are all with the opinion, people of occupied Kashmir. And I would also like to thank Tehreek Kashmir, Denmark, Danish Pakistani Affairs Council and other friends and other community leaders and other organizations who have helped organize this event. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're just discussing if I should have the flowers before or after. But I will express my gratitude and thank you for enlightening us on the situation on Kashmir, not only about facts, but also true stories about real people, even some of your family members. And with that knowledge follows a responsibility and obligation to act. Because human rights is not only about paragraphs in law. I think it's about a fundamental respect for life, for human life. So, when you hear about atrocities and cruelties, as we have been hearing about today, you have an obligation to act. And I think a lot of people will think so and feel an obligation to do something for the Kashmiri people if they know what we know after today. So that is the big task for us after today. That is to bring attention about the situation in Kashmir. Mr. President, you said so nice of you that I was the window to the Danish Parliament, and I was very honored that you said that. But again, with that follows that big responsibility. And I will do everything I can to live up to that responsibility and try to raise awareness in Denmark, in the public, but also in Parliament about Kashmir and the Kashmiri people. And I really hope that maybe we can meet again, maybe not next year, but maybe in 2 years, 3 years, and then we can say that we actually succeeded in putting this situation on the agenda and changing the narrative. Because there's one sentence that I wrote a lot of things down, but which was really, I think, really nailing it. That is that you can't be neutral between the oppressed and the oppressors. And that is what we go out of that door. That is the obligation not to be neutral to the oppressors. And I hope that, I know that all of you sitting here will help me, help us, raising attention to this issue, and I will thank you for your solidarity. Some of you have family members in Kashmir, but for many of you it's also a question about solidarity, human rights, respect, and I respect that very much, so thank you to all of you.
I would like to ask everybody from the DPAC team to come on stage, because all this is all because of you and the Kashmir team. But I would like to see you first on stage up here. Everybody. Dada, Khalid, everybody. Mia Munisa, Adil, Pradesa, the Kashmir team also, everybody are here, thanks a lot. These are all the people who make this conference and everything what is going to happen the next 3 days possible. So they've been working very, very hard for the last many months. I would like them to stay here on the right side, because first of all, I would request the Honorable President if he could have the bouquet of flowers, they have 2 flowers over here, and then the shield, Zinia. I would like the President to offer you the shield and also a bouquet of flowers. I would like to request Charlotte on stage. Thanks a lot. Mr. President. Then if I can have for each of our guests here and one of my team members here. So if Adil wants to present this first, so he can present this to Mr. President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. I would like you to present this one to Zulfikar Gadesi, our Honorable Ambassador here in Denmark. Thank you for speaking. Munir Sahab, I would like to request Ghulam Muhammad Safi Sahab or Turabi Sahab, yes, well, I couldn't see which one. Turabi Sahab, please. Munir Sahab. Ghulam Muhammad Safi Sahab. Fahim Kani Sahab, please. Malan Bashir Sahab. On stage, please. Again, thanks a lot for the speech. It was a pleasure. Please, Bex Khalsa. On stage, Sharif Sahab and Zafar Sahab, please. Malik Tahir Sahab. Zafar Sahab, please. Malakatik Sahab. President Yas Sahab, I couldn't see you because of all the nice Karakola hats in the lot for coming all the way from the United States. Okay, could we have a group photo? Senior Charlotte Janne, could you please come on stage? We just have a group photo with all the team, together with all the distinguished guests. One thing I would like to say that I was told today by Ziggy actually is the importance of the hall we are sitting in. Behind us we can see the parliament. This parliament picture is depicting the parliament that was made after the Second World War. So the freedom fighters of Denmark was these parliamentarians we see behind here. So I think in some time we will have some freedom fighters and a lot of freedom in Kashmir, and we can have a picture like this and a parliament like this. Thanks a lot, everyone.